The President of the Legislative Council. Members will please remain standing while the Chief Executive enters the chamber. The Chief Executive. I would like to remind members to keep quiet. Without further warnings, anybody continuing to shout will have to leave the chamber immediately. Dr. K.K. Kwok, please leave the chamber. Mr. Roy Kwong, please leave the chamber. Dr. K.K. Kwok and Mr. Roy Kwong, if you do not leave the chamber, we cannot continue with the meeting. The Chief Executive's question time. The question time is conducted in a short answer format. Members who wish to ask questions, please press the Request to Speak button. Each member called upon to ask a question will be given 3 minutes. The time for asking a question should not exceed 1.5 minutes, so the Chief Executive will have time to reply. Mr. Lim Cheuk Ting. Mr. President, 30 years ago, the People's Liberation Army cracked down on the democracy movement. Tanks rode over the bodies of students. 30 years later, Carrie Lam, you used the tank of the extradition law so as to crush the rule of law in Hong Kong, destroying the confidence of the business sector. My question to you is as follows. How many Hong Kongers would you need to stand in front of your tank of the extradition law before you were hot? You can only ask one question. I will stop right after my warning. As soon as you endorse the evil law, in the future, there will be a lot of people who will be wronged as a result of the extradition. You'll go down in history to be the first and foremost accomplice. You would like to curry favor from the central authorities. You betray Hong Kong. You will become part of the page of shamefulness in the history of Hong Kong. The Chief Executive. Mr. President, soon I will mark the 2nd anniversary of my becoming the Chief Executive. On the 1st of July 2017, I gave a speech, and since then, I have been upholding the following idea. That is, I would like to see the basic law being implemented successfully and to defend the core values of Hong Kong, one being the rule of law. And I've been in the post of the CE for 2 years. I've gone on a lot of overseas visits, and I've confirmed that the rule of law is the most important core value in Hong Kong. And it depends on a number of factors. First of all, law abiding. Be it on the part of the government, citizens, and the business sector, we have to abide by the law. Second, we need to have an independent judiciary. Thirdly, we need to make sure that we have a legal aid system which is good so that everybody will be equal before the law. Such values are still in existence in Hong Kong. When compared with the pre-1997 days, they have been given more weight. Well, in the past, we used to score 60, 70 marks as far as our rule of law in the past. But now it has always been 90 marks or above, and we rank first. The CE is answering your question. Please allow her to continue with her answer. It's up to the CU to decide how to answer your question. CU, please continue. Well, we are amending 2 pieces of legislation. The purpose is to uphold justice so as to discharge international obligations and to crack down on serious crime. And this is to allow us to be consolidating our core values. Sorry, speaker is off mic. Mr. Wilson Orr. Thank you, Mr. President. CE. In the last budget, there was a measure to make sure that those who have been left out will be covered. But then this is something supposed to be good, but then in handing out the cash, there have been a lot of inadequacies and lack of efficiency. And I understand that for the Working Family and Student Finance Agency, 3.44 million applications forms have been handed out. But then I've been approached by somebody who said that the father got an SMS message, but the son didn't, even though both had applied for the $4,000 cash handout. He did ring up the hotline, but then either he couldn't get through or he left a message without somebody coming back. And for the 1823 hotline, again, nobody was answering his call. Now, the application deadline has passed. The DAB has received a lot of inquiries. CE, do you have any measure to deal with the problem? The Chief Executive. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. Orr. I think on a number of occasions we did talk about the sharing and caring scheme. When it comes to the implementation, it has caused certain concern and has caused anxiety on those who will be benefiting from the scheme. Well, it is going to be a large-scale scheme. We have got more than 3 million applications. It's a one-off measure, and we would like to make sure that we're spending the money properly. It is supposed to be a scheme to fill the gaps. It is really difficult to implement, but then I do hope that you will be understanding and tolerant about the staff members of the Working Family and Student Financial Assistance Agency. Because they're under a lot of pressure, they all want to do a good job and they want to do it properly and in a highly efficient manner so that the caring and sharing assistance will be granted to the citizens. But as a department, they have to follow different rules and procedures. We'll give full support to the agency and will provide all the resources needed so that in the coming days, when it comes to the handing out of the money, they can meet the needs and the aspirations of the people. The Chief Executive. Well, there have been so many blunders in this scheme. Would you like to take up the DAB's idea so that we have a standing arrangement in future when you have to hand out the cash again? We can streamline the administrative procedures and then people can share the fruits of economic prosperity earlier. Well, I think, first of all, we need to understand what is meant by a cash handout scheme. It is universal and it is non-means tested. And it's means tested. We want to give the money to those who are in need of it. So under such an overriding principle, it will be difficult to have a standing program, a permanent program, because every time the targets will be different. However, the SAR government is still bound to carry out a review in the light of the implementation. That is what should have been done and what should be avoided in future if we want to make it better. Mr. Wong Kwok Kin, Mr. President, CE, regarding the Fugitives Bill, I understand that the administration would like to send the bill directly to the full council for resumption of second reading debate. Now the Bills Committee has been paralyzed. We understand and we support such a move. Well, regarding the extradition law, there have been a lot of concerns. It is said that on the mainland, their standards of the judicial system would be varied. And therefore, we have said that perhaps it would take the central authorities, say, for example, the Supreme People's Court or the Supreme People's Procuratorate, to initiate the process. I would like to know whether you have already reached a consensus with the central authorities. Moreover, some legal scholars, when commenting on this matter, said that according to the basic law, the CE is accountable to the central authorities. When there is a request from the central authorities, the CE cannot say no, even if the court decides that it is not a suitable case for transfer, or if the evidence is not strong enough, the CE will still have to execute the order from the central authorities. Is that true? The Chief Executive. First of all, I'd like to thank Mr. Wong Kwok Kin for understanding our need to take such a difficult decision. That is, we would like to resume the second reading debate. Mr. Wong has said that he understands our decision. As Mr. Wong has said, it is not an easy decision. We would like to follow the procedures and we would like to listen to the views of the LegCo. Now that we have come up with such a decision, we will still be listening to the views. Now, regarding the amendments to the two pieces of legislation, it is not targeted at the central authorities, or to be exact, the other parts of mainland China. As to your worry, I think I can understand it, because we have a lot of exchanges and interaction between the mainland and Hong Kong. Many people work there. So I can understand the concerns. I have already put the concerns across to the central authorities, and I'll continue to take up the matter with the central authorities. Regarding the anxiety already expressed, we are aware of it. Regarding the point made by Mr. Wong, we will have a positive response, but I'm afraid this is not the occasion for us to give a overall reply, a comprehensive reply concerning your worries about the case in the mainland. Now, as to the statement that the CE is accountable to the central authorities, I cannot say no to any request, and so all the requested persons will be handed over. This is not right. I'm not just accountable to the central authorities. I'm also accountable to what happens here, who lives here in the SAR. Well, my role is to trigger the mechanism. What it means is that we would not want to alert the suspect, so we need somebody within the executive to trigger the mechanism, and then we refer the case to the court. This is the procedure in overseas countries as well. I think you know that we have the fourth power, that is the media, and they play a very strong monitoring role. Now, if the court says that there isn't sufficient evidence and the requested person should not be returned, the CE in this case would not and cannot return that person. We do have a robust system. So I don't think it is possible for the following to happen. That is, the CE alone makes a decision and then sends somebody to whatever jurisdictions for a court case and to be dealt with. Dr. Junius Ho, CE, you have had a hard time. It's a hot potato in relation to the extradition law. Earlier on, you have said that for 20 years, Hong Kong hasn't dealt with this problem. You have also quoted what Mr. John Lee, the S4S, has said. That is, we have buried our head in the sand for 20 years. Today, you acted decisively, and I need to commend you for such a move. Now, CE, last year, I put a question to you. I asked you when we are going to introduce legislation for Article 23 of the Basic Law. Now, for the extradition law, we have buried our heads for 20 years. For Article 23 legislation, it is something in the public domain, and as you have said, it is our constitutional duty. Now, we are able to fight for the endorsement of the extradition law amendments. For the Article 23 legislation, you said that you would like to wait for a more favorable social environment. Irrespective of what you said and what you have done, this is still elusive. So I ask you, when are you going to introduce Article 23 legislation?
Point of order. Chairman, I think Mr. Junius Ho is questioning or suspecting that Mrs. Regina Ip, as Secretary of Security at that time, was an ostrich. There's no point of order. As Chief Executive. Myself and Mr. John Lee never criticized the decision. We have never left the SAR government since the beginning of the SAR. We've been a member of the SAR. We're not being critical. We're merely saying that some said we deliberately try not to do it. Or some said that we are getting in the way of the MLA arrangement with the mainland. Now, Article 23 legislation is a constitutional duty. It is an important task to maintain the security of the nation. Since I've assumed office, I've been trying to create a favorable condition, but we are getting further and further away from this condition. This is a political reality I have to contend with. That the Article 23 legislation is different from this legislative amendment by nature. The amendments to these two legislation is to manifest the rule of law and to tackle crimes together with other nations, and we don't want Hong Kong to become a haven for criminal suspects or for Hong Kong criminals trying to escape justice in other jurisdictions. Also, the Taiwan case happened. It shows the need to plug the loophole, and this legal loophole should be plugged. Article 23, our position is the same, but political reality is making this more difficult. Ms. Au Nok Hin, good morning, Mrs. Lam. Now, you claim that you didn't need any lobbying from the liaison office. Now, we have Mr. Han Zheng and Mr. Wang Jimin speaking up for you, and these business sector members can say anything. I don't think you should be you shouldn't be an alarmist. You shouldn't use the excuse of foreign interference to cover up the mainland interference. Mr. Samuel Fai said that the Western countries will not easily intervene Hong Kong. The mainland China, because of what you call the Western interference, is making the situation one that is difficult to turn around. There are so many tycoons that have assets in Hong Kong. They would be pulling out of Hong Kong. The property market and the stock market will tumble. Do you think that the enactment of these fugitive ordinance will deal a severe blow to Hong Kong's economy? Chief Executive. Well, this is the first time that I heard from Mr. Au raising concerns about the tycoons from the mainland, or the younger generation of tycoons from the mainland. We started this work because we saw the needs in Hong Kong. There is a legal lacuna, there is a legal loophole that we have to plug. But it's been 3 months now since February. What happened is some members applied the double standard. The mainland said something, and they said that this is interference, and this is undermining Hong Kong's one country, two systems. And they went to overseas countries and they coached the Western nations as to how to treat me, and they're trying to stop the chief executive from doing certain things, and they regard this as normal. And I urge members to be consistent in their words and in their deeds. With regard to this amendment, Mainland is showing support. I think this is only natural. The Mainland would like to see one country, two systems being implemented successfully, and we have one country, two systems. And together with Taiwan and Macau and the Mainland, we can tackle crimes. Mr. Ao Nok Hin, please let Chief Executive answer your question. Chief Executive. I can't see how you mean by arbitrarily commenting on Hong Kong affairs. Mr. Cheng. Chief Executive, there are 3 cases of rat hepatitis E, and there are many people who complain about the presence of rats where they live. Now, some express that we should not touch the rats because one is liable to get infected. Chief Executive, the government has started a 3-week cleansing operation, and we will tackle all the rats in Hong Kong. At the present moment, we don't have any additional resources. We don't have extra manpower. They are just redeploying the resources, and the frontline workers will be doing a harder and harder work. Chief Executive, will you increase the resources? Will you have any target, any particular objectives to achieve? Chief Executive, well, this is the issue that we are also concerned about. Public cleanliness is something that we do have the unshakable responsibilities. The infestation of rodents is something that is very dear to our hearts. The CS, Mr. Matthew Cheung, is coordinating all the departments concerned to tackle the problem. At the internal meeting, asked this question as to whether in Hong Kong whether we have the experts in tackling rodents. In the public policy areas, from time to time, we would invite experts to tell us the extent of the risks. If there are any expert opinions, any utilization of technology, we're all ears. Mr. Cheng talked about the resources. Rest assured, Mr. Cheng, I can give you the assurance that in order to tackle the infestation of rodent, resources would not be a problem. I don't think the FS would have an objection because this is something that has everything to do with our day-to-day life. All the human resources, all the equipment, and so on. Don't worry, we will work together with the department's consent. Mr. Cheng, Chief Executive, that the rear lanes and the streets were kept clean after SARS epidemic, but now I hope that instead of 3 months, you would mount regular clearance, cleansing operation on a regular basis to clean all these places. Chief Executive, I agree that all these initiatives would have to be done on a persistent basis. Now, under the stewardship of the CS, the 3-month operation will go on. We will learn from this exercise and see how these can be incorporated into our day-to-day work. Dr. Priscilla Leung. President, in Hong Kong, we have some really stupid opponents, and they are impervious to any opinions. And they are asking the U.S. government to speak up every single day, and this has turned into a subject in the Sino-U.S. tussle. We wish that we could have a Bills Committee, but I'm aware of the political situation. Because of a confrontation, we cannot get the Bills Committee off the ground. Many people are concerned that by taking the bill to the full council, there will be very little chance for discussion. That the BPA did make some constructive views. I'd like to pursue 2 points. First of all, In terms of the transfer of fugitives, many jurisdictions, when surrendering their nationals to another jurisdiction, would send observers to make sure that from the detention to the trial, the procedures will be observed. Now, for some unfamiliar jurisdictions that were indeed familiar with the mainland, for unfamiliar jurisdictions, I think the first step, i.e. the chief executive triggering the process, we should make sure that they fulfill the conditions before we trigger the procedure and surrender the fugitives. Will the chief executive be open to these suggestions? Chief executive, like Dr. Leung said, this is a bill proposed by the administration, and we fail to have any interactive process at the Bills Committee, and this is an undesirable process. Some are concerned that with this precedent being set, every single bill will experience the same procedure. Now, this will not happen. We will not allow this to happen, but on this occasion, I heard from Dr. Martin Lau that this is unprecedented. This is something that we've never seen before. We took the very difficult decision to do what we are proposing to do. Coming back to this issue, now the Bills Committee couldn't get off the ground for 6 weeks, but we have never stopped any interaction. Mr. John Lee has been making his rounds, talking to different people. I'm sure that we have considered the views raised by Dr. Leung. Like I said in answer to Mr. Wong, we will consolidate all the details and come up with a response. When it comes to CSAs, there is a time limit, and we'll let members know whether we can improve certain areas. Mr. Kenneth Leung, Chief Executive, in the fugitive bill, there is a deadline of July for this to be passed. Here, we fail to achieve any progress. I think the responsibility lies with the administration. In the history of drafting legislation, I've never seen anyone which is so controversial as this. And you are setting a deadline. The embassy in Taiwan told us that even if this bill is enacted, they will not request the surrender of this suspect to Taiwan. Why is it that you're still imposing a deadline on Hong Kong, Chief Executive? First of all, we're not imposing any deadline of July, but to achieve the two objectives of the amendment. One of them is to deal with the homicide case in Taiwan involving a Hong Kong person. It is expected that the perpetrator is likely to be released by October. And if we don't have this piece of legislation, the Hong Kong SAR government doesn't have any power to detain him, and so he'll be going scot-free. We've answered the Taiwan issue on many occasions. We must have the legal foundation. We must have the system, the protocol. Like Dr. Priscilla Leung said, what will be needed in the process of transfer, we need to sit down and talk about the details. And we have to work out how the transfer will be implemented, and we have to manifest natural justice and bring the suspect to justice. Now, since February 15th, when we consulted the security panel, we've been listening to views. On the 3rd of April, we had the first and second reading. We had the timetable worked out internally. There should be sufficient time for us to get through the Bills Committee meetings, that there will be enough time for public hearings. And then we'll come back to the full council for discussion. And there will be no less than the time that will be allotted to the time that we dealt with the co-location issue. Now, with 100 hours, we can extend it to 2 hours. We can confine it to a couple of months. I mean, but who caused us to lose 6 months' time? Now, you said that I'm trying to rush this. I think I have to say that we've lost quite a bit of time in the process.
到此為
This is the end of the Chief Executive's question time. The Chief Executive is leaving the chamber. Members will please stand up. The Chief Executive's question time ends now. We have our regular meeting.
梁志祥議員。
Question 1, Ms.